Hello and welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by award-winning musician, composer, and educator Jonny Lipford. We talk about what first drew him to the Native American flute, how it continues to inspire his creative and personal journey, and the healing experiences it offers through both performance and teaching. Jonny shares insights from 2 decades of composing, touring, and teaching, his work through Horizon's Flute School and Store, along with reflections on cultural respect, creative expression, and the flute's growing role in sound healing. As a special treat, he also plays live the flute for us during this episode. Please enjoy this wonderful conversation with Jonny Lipford. Welcome in, Jonny Lipford. It is so great to have you here on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me to be in this space with you. It's really great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's get into the Native American flute and what first drew you in with the flute.
Yeah, so I love sharing this story. Thanks for that question. I started with the native flute when I was about 13 years old. I found it's so interesting to hear everybody's like flute story, right? How they came into the flute. Mine's a little different. I discovered the flute through a cartoon when I was a teenager. I was homeschooled and avoiding my schoolwork. I was watching TV, flipping through the channels, and came across this character playing a brown end-blown flute. What I was actually hearing later, I realized, was the South American pan flute. And they just have that kind of windy, breathy, but also haunting sound. I didn't recognize the sound, but I got on the very early internet and did some research on brown and blown flutes and came across Native American flutes, a couple of them, a few of those, begging my mom to buy me one for Christmas. I'm like, this is all I want. You know how kids are. This is all I want. This is all I ask for. This is it. This is the one. And she was like, oh, this is another thing that's going to end up in the closet in 2 weeks, kind of thing. But I was very persistent and I got my first flute on Christmas Day in 2002. This is a replica of that flute. I say replica because my very first flute looked just like this, but I didn't know about flute maintenance. I didn't know how to care for it. And growing up in Florida and this flute being made from bamboo, mold got a hold of it and unfortunately had to let that one go. So it was some Christmases ago that I ended up getting myself a replica made of that first flute.
Can we hear it a little bit since you have it there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll play, I've got a little reverb that I'll turn on, just helps a little bit. And this is a 5-hole flute. For those that are a little unfamiliar with flute, I always use this as a teaching tool. You'll find flutes with 5 holes and 6 holes, and they are pretty much the same, but now we have a lot of different tunings and such with flutes. But this represents probably the most simple in form. Here we go.
Beautiful. And so that's bamboo as well?
This is
Yeah.
bamboo, and a lot of the bamboo flutes. This one's a little different because it's open on the end, whereas most flutes have more of a shaped mouthpiece. But that's just one characteristic of bamboo. You can get bamboo flutes with that shaped mouthpiece as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does have a slightly airy sound. Yeah. So, of course, you've gone from that flute to anybody watching this rather than just listening to, I can see all the flutes behind them. What was the turning points? How did this develop into more than a hobby?
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier with a friend, a coach of mine, and we were talking about how he accidentally fell into what he does. And I think that's true for a lot of us. Like growing up, it's like when you're in school, they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, I want to be a nurse, a paramedic, a doctor, a rock star. Some kids have that, that desire. But for me, it wasn't any of those things. Actually, it was a paramedic, but when I found the flute, I kind of just stumbled into this thing that really made sense for me. And growing up on a farm, being homeschooled, I would get an allowance every week for my weekly chores, which was a lot. And I would save my allowances to buy flutes. And so I would end up buying flute kits that I would have to finish myself just because they were more affordable. And so I started to develop a small collection of flutes, learning more about them, and kind of speeding up to today. It's one of those things where, it's just this evolution of things, these series of events that kind of organically happen. When I was a teenager, so having found the flute at 13, I started just writing things. And I tried piano lessons when I was a kid. My sister took piano lessons and she excelled in it. She can play the piano beautifully. Any piece of music you put in front of her, she can play. And I was like complete opposite. But, having a sibling who does something, you're like, well, I want to do it and I can probably do it better. So I tried and I failed. I failed piano lessons miserably. There was a piano always in the house, though, with her having gone through piano lessons. And I would just sit and I'd play. And then I'd play these two notes and these three notes together. And I started building chords. And I learned about chord structures. And I played melody over here. And I started to put things together. It started to make sense for me. And I learned what notes were in relationship to the flute. So as I played this on my right hand on the piano, I knew the position on my flute. So writing melodies, this is still how I play and write. Actually, a lot of my music is on the piano, and then transfer it over to the flute. But I released my first album at 17 after writing about 12 songs or so, and ended up in a local studio in Florida recording my first album, not really knowing anything about the music industry, not knowing anything about how to do a CD, and just kind of put one foot in front of the other. And to date, I've released probably 16 or 17 albums, a new one in the works. And so it's just those small steps that over time, they start to build. They build momentum, they build in magnitude as well.
Yeah, I'm curious in your time in, working with the flute, there's something about the Native American flute that draws people in, it can be seen as calming or meditative or even healing. Have you seen that or felt that? What do you think it is about just the sound of a Native American flute that draws people in?
I think it's something like very primal. I remember having conversations with students and we were trying to align, I think you'll appreciate this, trying to align like what's your favorite key, right? And it's like what key really resonates with you? And then we take it a layer deeper and we're like, well, why? Why does that key resonate with you? And I think for many of us, why drum makes so much sense and why this certain key makes so much sense, it has to do with our mother, right? We feel that heartbeat from our mother when we're in the womb. We also hear that frequency from our mother when we're in the womb. And so it's really interesting what we gravitate towards as far as our preferred key, with flute, with anything for that matter. But I think when people hear the native flute, and a lot of flute stories, origin flute stories for people, they were traveling out west and they heard it in a gift shop and then they saw them and they related that sound to sight and it just clicked. So many of us hear that sound as so close to the voice and it's so ethereal and it's just really for so many people It is a calling rather than just a sound that they hear. And then, thanks to the internet and YouTube and places like this, we find how accessible they are, how easy they are to start playing, right? It's like when you hold a singing bowl for the first time and you feel that vibration, it's like it unlocks something in you. Same thing with the flute.
And with this particular instrument, how do you approach sharing it with cultural roots, and honoring the lineage while also being creative and innovative with the instrument, kind of respecting both sides?
Yeah, great question. I think for a lot of people, when they look at, the flutes that are behind me, some of these flutes that even you can't see in my room, like I have historical flutes, and then I have like what we call the modern flute. And really, what I look at and what I primarily focus on in my teaching and my performing and what I do creatively with the flute is that of the modern flute. So, without getting too much into history, I do have a short documentary that I did on YouTube called Echoes in Time that walks through early flutes, historical flutes, moving into kind of where we see that huge transition to what we have today, known as the modern native flute. And that has to do with somewhere in like the 1980s. Michael Graham Allen, or Coyote Oldman, as some people may know him, he was an innovator, he was a creator, he was a flute maker, and at the time that he was starting to learn about native flutes, he was studying the Japanese shakuhachi, which is a five-hole flute, four on top, one on thumb hole in the back. But its scale was so easy and adaptable. But again, many musical instruments are completely chromatic. You can do more with them than what's just innately available. And so he was like, I wonder if we want the revival of this instrument that is kind of waning, then we need to reinvigorate it and we need to make it more accessible for people who are not necessarily musical. And so what we end up with, when I show you this flute, it looks very primitive, it looks very simple. When I show you a silver flute or a classical flute, you go, I can't play that. I show you this, you go, I'll give it a try. And so what we have here is we've got those five holes on this flute. It's a minor pentatonic scale. And so bringing that to the flute opened up quite a bit. But this is our modern flute. So how do we go from kind of backwards, modern flute, then to historic flute? Many of the historical flutes that we look at, they didn't have music modes and things like this in native culture. They were going off of really building flutes based on body measurements, on also what their oral tradition was. And so they would build flutes that they could replicate some of these cultural and ceremonial songs. Now, how we respect that culture is by, you'll find that we have a number of songs that are available publicly. I deal with this with students quite a bit. Songs like Zuni Sunrise, songs like Cherokee Morning Song, right? They come out of some of those traditions, but they're widely accepted to share. But then there's a whole roster of songs that are not meant to be shared publicly, even in what we would call ceremony. These are for their culture, their tribe, their ceremony. So really respecting when someone comes up and says, I know this traditional song and I'm going to share it with you. It may or may not be the right song, and it is definitely not the right place to play something like that. So respecting those sorts of things is really paramount when it comes to playing something like this. And then also, respecting the flute for what it is, right? We have a modern adaptation of a cultural instrument, right? We do have some of those historic flutes that we see a lot in museums or in collections and things like this. But how we share those today is different than what they would be shared like in a real traditional setting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, I think something certainly has happened with the revival, whether it's been from the 80s on or not. I'm really curious what you've seen in the past 5, 10 years And coming from my perspective, people are bringing it more and more into sound healing and sound baths. So I wonder if, kind of in correlation to that, there's more and more people getting into it. What are your thoughts on the growing trend, and how do you see the flute's place kind of in this field and sound healing and sound baths?
Yeah, it's really interesting, when you see those, when you're around long enough to see these trends, right? You see these growths in different areas. In the early, like when I was coming into the flute community or industry, whatever you want to label it, it was primarily, native flutes, and we had some bands and things like that. I remember being at a performance at a festival, and there was a vendor there who had this metal UFO looking drum, right? This was the first handpan that we saw coming into market, and they were selling for like two, $300, and everybody kind of giggled like, ah, that's funny. It's not really going to take off. Now look how vast this entire industry is and how much it's really rooted in the sound healing community. I think the flute is the same way. It comes up as this kind of revival instrument, right? People are starting to learn more about it. It's growing popularity. What we find most, and I guess what would be the largest part of my student base, is someone who is a little bit further along in life. They're either retired or looking at retirement. They appreciate this instrument as a way to decompress, to get rid of the stuff of life, right? Um, and so, what I've seen in the last 10 years, though, is that the sound healing community has kind of taken this instrument and kind of pulled it over into it. And it's really cool to see, like, when you get ready to set up for a sound bath, you glance around and you see all these different instruments. There aren't many that have to do with breath. So the native flute really fills that space. And there's a lot of vocal work that happens in some people's sound bath and their experiences and what they're providing. But the flute, especially for those who don't feel confident with their voice, it becomes their voice. They can work with that breath work, and there's so many dynamics that you can do with a breath or a woodwind instrument. It's really incredible. It's amazing. So when I work with students, we're really exploring that emotional. It's not just about learning a song, right? It's how you play the song. It's how you deliver the message. It's how you deliver the music. Those volume, vibrato, those techniques, those things. What do you want to feel? What do you want to give? What do you want other people to receive? So to have the flute, especially since COVID, when COVID hit and everything kind of shut down, but then we kind of built online, like it connected so many people. They had time and space to do something that they want, something that they've been searching for to really do. And I had a lot of students come out of that, a lot of people finding the native flute, finding singing bowls. They were now ready to, not that they were ready, but they were given the opportunity to sit and say, what do I want? What calls to me? What am I missing in my life? The hustle's on pause. What does this mean? So I think through that and other experiences, we've seen a really big growth, not only for flutes and sound healing, but sound healing in general has really gained popularity.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple points on that. I really do agree that the past 5 years have been pivotal. And also, what you said about, incorporating the flute into sound baths, some of the instruments, the bowls, you strike them, they do their magic, but there is something about the flute, your breath, it coming from you that has a bit more of an expression and emotion and energy behind it that people find very powerful, intense, or just, such a different texture in a sound bath. And what you were saying about the pandemic now, before we move into your school and what your offerings, it occurs to me that you jumped into this really full time right before the pandemic, I think. So I would love to hear about how you decided to make this your full time
Mm.
everything. How did you make that leap?
Yeah, so It not easy, not a smooth transition, and it doesn't happen overnight. Like I mentioned earlier, it's these small steps. So for people looking to do something like this, something very heart-centered and purposeful that brings them a lot of meaning rather than punching a time clock, it's not an easy transition, but it is totally worth it. But you got to make it work. So I was doing music full time, my teenage into early adulthood. I was traveling a lot, doing a lot of conventions, performances. And what I was doing in that time is I was really building a network, building a community of people. And so when I needed to call on that, it was there for me. So I didn't start out necessarily from day one dry. But I had, as life does, throws you curveballs. And I was employed for about 5 years with a local nonprofit, doing meaningful work that I loved. That was very hard to step away from because I felt the impact of what I was doing. However, I also felt coming home after doing marketing, communications, graphic design for this nonprofit, I felt at the end of the day creatively dry and tired. And it's not something, creativity is not just something that you can say, okay, let's go. You kind of have to manifest it, but you also have to nurture it. And if you don't have a lot to nurture it with, then it may not come. And so, talking with Maria, my wife at the time, I said, I really want to do this. I think we're in a place where we can make it happen. I'm really scared. I'm really scared to make this jump. And it's very real, because playing happy music and doing what you love doesn't always pay the bills, but you got to somehow make it. And she was very supportive. She says, "You know what? You need to try. You need to try and do this. I've got us. If something happens, you can always go back to work, but you got to try. If you don't try, you may not make it." So I left in February of 2019. I plan to build out more performances and things like this. And I always had on the back burner, I want to do an online course because the online course industry was starting to really kind of ramp up during this time too. And I ended up launching my first one just before COVID hit, just before the pandemic. And so what we ended up with was in kind of our ecosystem a perfect storm. People were looking for something and now we had it available. So we built the first course and launched it in April 2020. And then I started workshopping. Zoom became a thing. Skype first and then Zoom. And I started to do workshops online. And what I was doing was just kind of hitting the pain points of flute playing, doing these certain techniques or getting through this kind of fingering pattern or whatever. And then I would test those, and then I would get enough information by doing workshops that I would have a course ready to go. And that's automated. And so I built several of those, which eventually led into starting a membership. And that really was helpful to our business to provide that steady income stream. So no longer, like with many artists and creative individuals who were relying on live performance when the pandemic hit, everything stopped. There were no performances, there was no income for performing musicians. So we all had to pivot quite a bit. So some really good steps were taken by us. We also stumbled through a lot of things. We learned a lot of things through that time. But the main thing is you've got to look at not just one thing. You have to look at, like live performances. Had I had a whole year set up of performances, I would have that knocked out overnight. So building different income streams as a creative individual is paramount because anything can happen and one of those can be taken away from you, but then you can go to those other ones, turn it on a little bit more, nurture it a little bit more, and you're able to sustain yourself by doing so.
Yeah, fantastic. And Horizons Flute School is what we're talking about. And I have to really shout out your introductory beginners course. Anybody looking to get into the flute, or maybe you have one and you just really want to get more confident on it. It's such a great foundational course in every way. So highly recommend. And through your online school workshops, you really have shared this instrument with so many people. What would you say your approach to teaching is, and what do you hope that students walk away with?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, one of the things that, well, actually, starting with the beginner course, I found myself over time because when I left my job, my full time job, I supplemented by taking on a lot of students. And what I found was I'm repeating myself over and over and over. You know this from teaching music too, right? The same steps. And I'm like, okay, there's a path here. There's a clear path to get from point A to B. So let's package that up. And so that's where it comes from. It's very methodical. But the more that you teach, the more that you learn. I learn from every single one of my students. Even today, like when we walk into Q&A sessions and they bring a question to me and I'm like, "Oh, that connects a dot." And so learn as you go, everybody together. My approach to music and teaching and sharing has always been easy. I want it to be easy. A lot of music and theory, when we start to get into those sorts of things, it gets really heady. People aren't trained in this area and they just go, they freeze up, and it just becomes really a hard struggle for them. So I like to break things down. Now, I am a non-musician. I did not train, I did not go to college to learn music. I did not go to college to learn entrepreneurship or business. I have everything that I've learned has been from my own mistakes. I learn, I test, I fail, I get back up. I learn, I test, I fail, I get back up. And the same thing for music. So I'm very, very aware and hypersensitive when a student comes to me and they're like, I'm in a complete rut with making music. And I say, okay, what's going on? I know this, and this. I'm like, all right, I've been there. Here's how we get out of it. So it's very relatable because I've walked that path, not just on paper, but in my own shoes, my own heart, my own head. So I deliver that in a way that makes it very easy to digest, and I'm all about those those little wins add up to be big wins, right? The small steps of consistency. It's not about intensity; it's consistency that gets you there.
Yeah, right. Well said. And has anyone's response to your teaching or music surprised you or stayed with you in a powerful way? Maybe there's been really a life change for somebody from your music or teaching.
Yeah. So with teaching, it's really great with our. I love our membership. I love our community because we're able to get together. We've got different points of contact in a month. There's probably 12 to 14 different points of contact to make with this group. And with working with students, whether it's in higher level learning or programming or through our membership or just through courses, I ask them, what do you want with this instrument? And everybody has something different. Some people, they're like, well, I want to stop freezing up when people ask me to play. I know stuff, I just forget it. It's like deer in headlights kind of mentality. It's like you forget everything, you lock up. Totally get that stage fright. Some people, I think one of the best stories I can share with you is I've got this student who came to me in 2019. I've been working with him almost every Tuesday since 2019. I forget which month he started. I think around this time or back in April. And he started out just by wanting to play the flute better. It has built up to, he has recorded almost 20 songs, and he wants to have this CD or this audio that he can share with his friends, his family, that has his imprint on it. I've had lots of students who go through and make, you know, become recording artists, become performers. And that's what I love is that I plant the seeds, they do the work, and they achieve their goals, and they amplify what I start for them. And that's the greatest gift, the greatest return on my investment in them is that they go out and they amplify all of this goodness in the world. That's incredible. That's what you do with your school too, right? You teach them, like, I forget the saying. It's like you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. That's the exact thing, and that fuels me so much, and that fuels my students. It's palpable. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so rewarding, seeing that aha moment for people or that progression, that excitement. I mean, there's nothing better than that. Yeah. Yeah. So, in sound healing, people are really realizing, especially with sound baths, that the performance options are limitless. We're not just kind of limited to a sound bath in a yoga studio. People are starting to get into corporate, just all kinds of different scenarios. And I know that you've performed in a wide variety of settings. Maybe what's one of the most memorable and or unexpected places that you've performed or offered an experience? Probably a lot.
Yeah, back in 2011 and 12, I toured. I was on the road probably 300 of 365 days that year. Lots of performances ranging from all sorts of things, right? Because when you're passionate about sharing something, you share it in any way that you can. Schools, libraries, coffee shops, performing arts centers, yoga studios. I mean, in a given week, I was in all these different settings. And it was really, really, really cool. Parts of it were really challenging. Parts of it, I'm like, why did I do this? And then others were really great, so it's that whole experience. I think one of the most memorable is probably not memorable. I shouldn't say it's the most memorable, but somehow it's sticking out today. I showed up at this coffee shop in Ohio, and I had got everything set up. I make sure because I'm making my way to this show. I show up and they're like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "No, I talked to the manager, so and so. Like this is my night to gig, right?" And I'm traveling through. This is just a pit stop onto something bigger in. I think I was headed towards New York, and they had no idea who I was. The manager was fired like 3 weeks ago, and like nothing got connected, right? I think many musicians have these kind of stories. And so I ended up that night I was feeling like I'm so mad because I drove here. I'm supposed to perform. I have it on my calendar. People are showing up. So here's what happened. The local guy who had the gig got the gig. He was playing that night. And I got a free cup of coffee thanks to the coffee house. And a few people showed up for my performance, and I had coffee with them, and I hit the road. So not everything always turns out the way that we expect it, but um, that's just one experience. I think one of my most memorable is a recent though, where I was doing a private gig, like you mentioned, corporate. I did a private performance for a large insurance company, and this is footage of this is on YouTube if anybody wants to check it out. It was in Milwaukee, the Buck Stadium in Milwaukee, and this is the first stadium that I had been given an opportunity to play in. And so 14,000 people around me. And I remember being at sound check going, is this real? Is this real? And I just hit those first couple of notes on the flute and just hearing them just kind of swell through the stadium. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. And I just think about how many people that day not only heard the instrument because they hear it, they hear all these different instruments in spas and elevators and streaming on Pandora, on Sirius XM, wherever they hear it, but they don't experience it. They don't know what it is, right? And they're just like, oh, it's really pretty. Oh, I like the sound of that. But for people to visually be in the presence, to feel the vibration of that music coming through, it was incredible. Like it was an ocean of this flute sound going out over these people. And I just remember, wow, how many people are experiencing this right now? It was phenomenal.
Amazing. Yeah, one not to forget. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes actually so people can experience that. And yeah, that's right. I can imagine the ripple effect of the people that were there, but also the ripple effect of the acoustics in such a place. Yeah, I can only imagine. Wow. Well, let's move into, I mean, you mentioned you have an album forthcoming. I know you have the summit coming up. Maybe just let us know about these new projects and anything that you're exploring right now.
Absolutely. So after so long, I have another album coming out. It'll be coming out in the fall. The title of it is called Discover the Warrior Within. And it talks about the hero's journey. And I'm approaching, well, I've been playing the flute for more than 20 years, but I'm approaching 20 years as a recording artist. And so I'm starting to do some bigger, more meaningful pieces of work, more thoughtful. I think as you go through life, as you go through it, what it is that you do, you gain wisdom of those things. And so things become richer, things become fuller. And so I'm super excited by this work, and ready to share. So I've got some music videos and promotions coming out for that. Also, what has been in the works for me is my book. I have had it written for a year, and I've been going back through and just kind of retoning, retooling a little bit. It's called the harmonic approach, and it's built off of the five pillars that I've built my business, and they spell music, music, meaning, unifying, innovating. Um, sorry, I can't spell music. Meaning, unifying, sharing, innovating, and caring. And so those five pillars. So anyone, like we talked about today, it shares my journey from going from full-time employment to full-time building a business, several businesses actually around the thing that I love and has become so much a part of my life. And so great for anyone who's in sound healing, looking to do this full time, scared to take that leap, turning that passion into, some income so they can support themselves and their family. And so I don't have a release date on that. There are lots of hoops to jump through. I'm very aware of what it takes to put an album out, but publishing a book is a little different. Similar steps, but just different steps. And so I want to play my cards right. I want to do the right steps. So I'll have it finalized here in the next month or two, and then likely early next year will be a release for that called the Harmonic Approach. So look for that. Be on the lookout. And then we do have, thank you, our upcoming Flute Summit at Prairie Woods here in Hiawatha, Iowa, where we get roughly 30-ish flute players together from around the country. They come from far and wide. We've got great instructors. You're on that lineup. I'm on that lineup. Joe Young from Idaho, John Norris from North Carolina, who is our flute historian. So anyone looking to really take a deep dive into the history and cultural influence of flutes, definitely he is the guy. We've got Lena coming in to do some work too, and another flute student of mine, John Gass, will be doing a presentation as well. So lots. That's in September, in mid-September, Prairie Woods. It's called the Horizons Flute Summit.
Yeah, sounds like a really rich experience. I'll link to that as well. Well, congratulations on your book. I know it's forthcoming, but that's a big effort, putting it together and then all the stuff to get it out. So we'll definitely watch for that. I wondered if you could leave us with just some final words on what you hope people feel or remember after experiencing your music, and then maybe you could leave us with a little flute playing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think there's three things that I really hope that someone, after they hear or experience my music, those three things, I want them to feel peace, I want them to feel love, and I want them to feel encouragement. Because life is hard. It throws you umpteen thousand things that get in your way. And encouragement is the thing I think that we need the most. And it's so easy for us to hand it out to others. We're so good, I think, naturally about building others up. And then we look in the mirror and we talk negatively to ourselves. Or we're on our car ride and we talk negatively to ourselves. So shifting that perspective. I don't think you and I would sit here and ridicule our 13-year-old selves saying, "Yeah, you're not going to do it. It's not worth it. You're not good enough." Don't do it today to yourself, right? Standing today. So build that self encouragement just as much as you give to others. It is so important. It is so vital, and we are so worth it. So just don't forget that. Um, I'm gonna not be choked up. the This flute, I thought about. I shared my first flute with you. This is not my last flute. I'm always adding to my collection, kind of cycling through and building a really strong collection. But this is one. This is the one that I shared on stage for 14,000 people. So this one will always be very special to me. This is made by JP Gomez of Heart Song Flutes. This is in the key of F sharp, and I'll just play a little improv for you.
Beautiful, stunning. Thank you so much, Johnny, for stepping fully into your path. It's very inspiring, and I hope that it will be empowering for others. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Thanks for having me today to share my story, my my anecdotes, and my flute notes with everybody. It's a real pleasure. I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing in this community and helping so many and build up this to something really powerful and meaningful. So thank you for the work that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com, on the YouTube channel, Sounds Heal Studio, for the podcast and new music, on Instagram at Natalie Brown Sounds Heal, and Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.